Wednesday Night Reviews.
Thank you for tuning in, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Konrad, and today I wanted to talk to you about TKO Studios. They're a brand new comic book company. They formed at the end of 2018, and their goal is to change commercially and creatively the comic book industry. And they've genuinely gotten off to an amazing start with their first 4 books, of which I'm going to review for you in this video, Sara. Now, the company has changed commercially how they do things because most comic book companies, you can only get their books through the distributor called Diamond, which most comic book companies, locals, or even major bookstores order through in order to get graphic novels or comics. With TKO, you can actually go right on their website and order their books and have them shipped to you, as I have done. They offer 3 formats. You can get their books digitally, in which you'll get 6 issues, of course digital copies for you to read. You can get trade paperback, which I have, and finally you can get a collector box set, which comes with a gorgeous box and inside of it printed separate issues of comics. My preference is the paperback, simply because I prefer to have single arcs like that collected for myself. It's very easy. When it comes to classic comic books, I prefer them by issue. However, for this review, I wanted a paperback so I could have it in one shot. The first book, as mentioned, I wanted to review was Sara. So I have my trade paperback version here. Now, Sara is written by Garth, Ennis, drawn by Steve Epting, and the coloring is done by Elizabeth Breitweiser. Now, Garth Ennis, of course, is known for many different books. He's written for just about every major comic company. Steve Epting, one of the main artists, I believe, creators of Winter Soldier, and extremely beautiful art in the book Velvet, which, please, if you haven't already, go pick up the trades. It's an awesome story. And truth be told, I had never before heard of Elizabeth Breitweiser, but based on her work in this book, if I see her name again, I'll be picking her work up, and I think you should too. So Sara takes place during World War II, when the Nazis occupied Russia and Russia fights back. Now, Sara focuses on the titular character, once again showed on the cover here, as well as a squad of female snipers in the Russian army, and they patrol the border, fending off Nazi patrols, supply runs, and of course soldiers. Throughout the story, we learn about Sara's past, how she came into the military, how she was trained under extraordinary circumstances, where once she'd mastered the basics, she was actually taught how to fire on live targets. So another female sniper who was a promising candidate, and their commander were actually out in the field. They would track down Nazi patrols and begin practicing their firing. The commander would talk them through the process of how they should do it, ask them who they want to shoot first and why, and then they would proceed. One interesting thing that is captured in those moments, and it is a theme throughout the book, is dehumanization. So, of course, Nazis are sort of world-renowned villains. You can see them parodied in The Lion King. The stormtroopers in Star Wars are always a great comparison. Sort of a faceless, armored villain. Many different stories rely on a similar archetype as a Nazi, or bad guys coordinated in a military fashion. That's how archetypal the Nazi militaries become. And this book teaches these snipers to do that, or their commanders do. So they're not Germans, they're Nazis. You know what? They're not Nazis, they're the enemy. They're not the enemy, they're inhuman, they're beasts. Whatever you need to do to make killing them easier so that you can kill as many as possible. Now, along with that, teaching their soldiers to dehumanize their enemy, we also see that Sara is trained in a number of tactics that are, well, I'm pretty sure they violate current convention on war and would be considered criminal acts of war. And we see her take that training and how it dehumanizes her. So on the cover, she's shown very expressionless, and throughout the book as well, she barely has an expression on her face. She's very calm at all times. The odd expression will creep in on her face, for instance, in the bottom panel of this page. And even then, you never see her face change much. A little bit here and there. If you're really paying attention, you'll notice the detailing. And that's because of that training. That's because of, while she's been dehumanizing others, it's dehumanized her. And this even picks forward and goes more in depth, especially when we see her fight, where when she kills and when she gets shot at, when tanks roll in and soldiers and the women that she works with are under attack, that's when her emotions come out, her anger, her expressions. It is beautiful artwork, but it's also very terrifying because of the contrast between her almost emotionless machine-like self and how very human she becomes. One of the things that she's also taught, and every soldier is taught, is death or glory. So either fight and die, or win and earn glory for yourself and your family. And the way the Russian political system and all the officers are taught is, if you do well, it will mean well for your family. If you die, it's honorable. If you get glory in battle, it's even better. And they're taught very quickly about these rewards in that system. And the idea of death or glory continues throughout the book. Now, what I think makes this book amazing is that Garth Ennis takes that, and normally that would be like a great thing. You'd see like gladiators, for instance, death or glory, and there's cheering and everyone seems happy. But under the Russian military complex that we see in Sara, that has corrupted her, dehumanized her, it also starts to play into that, and you can see where that becomes a serious double-edged sword. So the pressure that death or glory bears down on Sara, as well as her comrades, is immense. And there's even a political officer you meet very early on in the book, within, I think, 5 pages, and she's a part of that system. Now, this political officer, she's a very lovely looking person. She's kind and friendly. She's constantly trying to reassure the girls, make sure they have what they need. Do they know where they need to be? Do they need more supplies? Do they have their food? Are they rested? At the same time, she's listening. So we very quickly get to see, not only has their training dehumanized them, not only has war dehumanized them, the acts of violence they must take out, the impending violence from the shock of battle that comes, how that takes a toll. But now their commanders are also forcing upon them roles and duties that they might not want to do as from their core personality, but they must as soldiers. So Sara, in this very indirect way, layers on the gravity of how heavy that is. Because there's no direct lines about it throughout the book. I believe there's one scene that really shows it. However, there's just this foreboding sense of dread, especially in Sara, because she's been there the longest and experienced it the most, that as this book carries on, that tension builds, not only from the soldiers, but from the Russian military complex. And just how complex and convoluted Sara's life gets and her choices are what make this book amazing. So one, the writing is on point. Like, it is great writing. It's consistent. It's never boring. It's always very fluid. All the writing flows in the scenes. There's never too much writing where it feels, like you're reading a text, but there's never too little writing where you're like, well, okay, I'm just flipping pages and looking at pretty pictures. At the same time, Ennis never needs to over-explain any of the tension I've been talking about, because you feel it. And that's where Epting comes in, because his art and the way that he shows expressions in those non-combat moments absolutely floored me. So one, it's super consistent art. It's gorgeous. All the landscapes, the people, the characters, they all look very interesting. They're all proportioned properly at all times. I mean, Epting is a top-notch artist. But it even goes a step above, where the art and the paneling perfectly feeds into the writing to allow you to feel that tension, which is why Sara blew me away, because the combination of writing and art just absolutely struck me. And Breitweiser's coloring, the way in which everything looks so realistic. Of course, it's drawn in a comic, it's not pictures or video, but there's a realism to the art that adds on a gritty layer of, at times, disgust, but it always enhances through the coloring. There's scenes, especially in combat, where, because it's primarily snow, but once everything gets shook up and bombs are dropped and bullets fly and blood and mud and snow mix, the amount of coloring that is shown is amazing. And then the choice to have Sara in white, because they're fighting during winter, so the camouflage, the fatigues would be white. Her rifle is wrapped in white in order to hide herself as a sniper. But even that coloring feeds back into the writing of how sort of Sara has become this blank slate, where almost every other female character, well, every character in fact in the book, usually has some sort of colored fatigue on. It's just very interesting to see, especially when the women go into combat, that they're all in white, this blank canvas. So the creative team on Sara absolutely blew it out of the park. So be sure to pick up Sara. Again, you can find it as a trade paperback like I have here, which is awesome. And I did want to point out, actually, TKO has perfectly branded their books. So just on the edge, you can see there, it says TKO. It slides up. It says Sara, and then it has the creators' names. Each of their books is branded with that type of marking, and yet they each have a different color now. Of course, Sara, because it takes place in Russia, there's a lot of red and white, which are predominant colors in the books. So the edge of this one is red. So yeah, please do order that from TKO. You can get it as a book, as 6 issues with a collector box, or if you happen to want to find the least expensive way, you can get all 6 issues digitally. You can read it right on your phone or your computer, and I'm sure you're going to have a hell of a time with it. You can also contact a local comic book store, and they can order it from TKO to get it. As of now, I don't believe any major bookstores are able to do so. So please, hit up your local comic book store or hit TKO Studios directly to pick up Sara.